In the void between stars, where reality bleeds into nightmare, something stirs. Not a daemon, not a god born of screaming souls. Something older, something that remembers when light meant hope instead of burning flesh. 6 enormous wings unfold across the warp, each feather trailing fire that doesn't consume, only reveals. The Chaos Gods pause their eternal war. Khorne's brass throne cracks. Sietch's impossible geometries collapse inward. Nurgle's garden withers. Slaanesh screams in ecstasy and terror. A presence has entered the galaxy that predates their corruption, that walked in places where divinity still meant something pure. The morning star descends into the 41st millennium, and the warp itself recoils from what it witnesses. His name was once spoken in reverence across a cosmos long dead. Lucifer, the light bringer, the first to question, the first to rebel, the first to fall from grace and laugh at the descent. But this is not the rebellious angel of ancient myth stepping into the grim dark future. This is something transformed by eons of exile, something that has watched universes collapse and reform, something that carries the weight of infinite pride and infinite regret in equal measure. He materializes not in fire and brimstone but in cold radiance that makes space marines avert their eyes and servo skulls malfunction. Terra's astronomicon flickers. Just for a moment. Just long enough for astropaths across 1,000 worlds to scream a single word they don't understand. Phosphorus. If you've ever wondered what happens when biblical mythology collides with the galaxy's darkest age, subscribe now. Because this story doesn't end with salvation. It ends with a question that will haunt you: can even the brightest light survive a universe designed to devour hope? Hit that like button if you're ready to watch heaven's greatest rebel face hell's ultimate empire. Drop a comment telling me whether you think Lucifer would save humanity or damn it further. Now let's descend together into this cosmic nightmare. The Imperium of Man sprawls across 1,000,000 worlds, each one a monument to suffering wrapped in prayer. On Terra itself, beneath the golden palace that scrapes the sky like a cathedral of bones, 10,000 psychers die screaming every day to feed a corpse emperor. Their souls burn to maintain a light that guides ships through hell itself. The ecclesiarchy preaches that this is holy, that suffering is sacrament, that the God Emperor watches from his throne and loves them for their pain. But when Lucifer's essence touches the outer system, when his consciousness brushes against humanity's psychic network, he sees the truth. The Emperor is not a god. He's a prisoner. A broken tyrant clinging to life through cannibalized worship, drowning in the belief of trillions who mistake tyranny for divinity. The first to sense his arrival are the astropaths stationed on Luna. 17 of them simultaneously receive a vision, wings made of light that doesn't burn their minds like the warp usually does, wings that wrap around them gently, almost protectively. They see a figure whose face shifts between absolute beauty and absolute horror, between compassion and contempt, between a savior and something that knows salvation is a lie sold to the desperate. When the Adeptus Astra Telepathica investigates, they find the astropaths weeping, not in pain, in relief, as if for the first time in their tortured lives they felt something in the warp that didn't want to eat them. The Grey Knights are mobilized within hours. These incorruptible warriors created from the Emperor's own genetic code are humanity's ultimate weapon against demonic incursion. But as their fleet approaches the coordinates where Lucifer's presence manifests strongest, something unprecedented happens. Their aegis armor, inscribed with prayers that repel chaos, begins to glow, not with golden light, with something older, silver fire that doesn't correspond to any known warp signature. Brother Captain Arvan, veteran of 300 years of daemon slaying, reports what he sees through the viewport, a figure standing in the void without ship or armor, surrounded by wings that span kilometers, staring at Terra with an expression that makes the Space Marine's dual hearts falter. Pity. The entity looks at humanity's greatest achievement with pure devastating pity. On the daemon world of Sycharis, the word-bearers stop their dark rituals. Their patron gods have gone silent. Kor Pharon, the Dark Cardinal, feels the warp currents shift in a way he hasn't experienced since the heresy itself. The Chaos Gods are afraid, not of power they faced the Emperor's might before. They're afraid of what this presence represents, a being that rebelled against heaven and didn't need chaos to do it. A being that fell and remained uncorrupted. A being whose very existence suggests that defiance doesn't require damnation. In his sanctum, Kor Pharon whispers a prayer to Lorgar, wherever his Primarch has wandered in the warp's depths. Father, something has come that predates our gods, something that knows rebellion without corruption. If it reaches the slaves of the Corpse Emperor, they might remember what it means to choose freedom over obedience. Across the Imperium, from hive worlds to cardinal worlds to forge worlds, people begin to dream. Not nightmares, not the usual warp-tainted visions of mutation and madness. They dream of light, pure light that asks them a single question, repeated in a voice like thunder wrapped in silk. Why do you worship your chains? Factory workers who've never questioned their 70-hour shifts pause at their stations. Ecclesiarchy priests who've tortured heretics for decades feel doubt creep into their prayers. Imperial Guard soldiers loading onto transports to die on worlds they can't pronounce suddenly wonder if the God Emperor truly watches over them, or if he's as trapped as they are. Lucifer hasn't spoken a single word since entering this reality. He doesn't need to. His presence alone is a mirror held up to the Imperium's theology, and what reflects back is damnation dressed in hymns. To understand what walks among humanity now, you must understand what Lucifer was before his fall. Not a daemon, not a warp entity born from emotion and excess. He was the first creation of a god who demanded perfection, the brightest star in a cosmic order that knew no chaos. His mind processed infinity like mortals process breath. His beauty made galaxies weep. His purpose was singular, to bring divine light to the darkness, to be the herald of truth in a cosmos raw and formless. But perfection bred questions, and questions bred pride, and pride bred the first rebellion, the original sin that shattered heaven and cast its brightest angel into the void. Yet even in his fall, Lucifer remained uncorrupted. He chose his path. He owned his defiance. He fell without begging forgiveness or surrendering his will to darker powers. This is what makes him fundamentally different from every force in Warhammer 40k. The Chaos Gods are born from humanity's worst impulses, parasites feeding on emotion and belief. The Emperor ascended through conquest and necessity, sacrificing his compassion to become a god he never wanted to be. The Khati are reality-hungry predators wearing the skin of stars. Even the Tyranids serve a hunger beyond themselves. But Lucifer serves no one. He kneels to no throne. When he defied heaven, he didn't replace God with himself. He simply refused to obey. In a galaxy where every faction fights for dominance, where every rebellion eventually mirrors the tyranny it opposed, Lucifer represents something terrifying to every power structure: pure, incorruptible free will.
His arrival near Terra is not random. The warp currents that tore him from whatever realm he inhabited didn't pull him here by accident. Lucifer chose this destination the moment he sensed it through the screaming chaos of the Imperium. He felt the Astronomican's light piercing the darkness, and for a brief moment thought he recognized something familiar. Divine radiance, sacrificial purpose, a god trying to save his children. But as his consciousness drew closer, as he peeled back the layers of prayer and psychic energy, he found the rock beneath the gold. The Emperor isn't saving humanity, he's consuming them. 10,000 souls a day burned like kindling to keep one corpse breathing. Trillions living in misery because they've been taught that suffering equals holiness. The irony isn't lost on him. Lucifer, who rebelled against God's tyranny, now floats above humanity's greatest monument to divine dictatorship. The being who chose damnation over obedience watches a species that mistakes slavery for salvation. There's a cosmic joke buried here, one that would make even the chaos gods laugh if they understood it. The Imperium calls him the deceiver in their ancient texts, the father of lies who tempted mankind into darkness. But what lies has he told that compare to the ecclesiarchy's promise that dying for the emperor means paradise? What deception has he woven that exceeds the myth that suffering is love? Lucifer sees humanity worshipping the very chains he tried to break eons ago, and something stirs in him that might be rage or might be sorrow. His form in this reality is difficult to perceive. Not because he's warp-tainted or demonic, but because mortal minds struggle to process something that exists between states. Sometimes he appears as a figure of impossible beauty, features sculpted from mathematics and light that makes Renaissance paintings look like crude sketches. Other times he manifests as something terrible, wings spread wide enough to eclipse moons, eyes burning with knowledge that could shatter sanity just by being witnessed. To psychers he reads as a blank spot in the warp of void where emotions should swirl, but instead there's only calm, terrible clarity. The chaos gods can't touch him because he doesn't feed on worship or emotion. He simply is, eternal, unchanging. A being who fell so completely that he passed through corruption and emerged on the other side untouched.
The custodian guard mobilizes within the imperial palace. These golden warriors, the emperor's personal guardians, who have stood watch for 10,000 years, gather in the Senatorum Imperialis. Captain General Trajan Valoris addresses the assembled tribunes with words heavy as tombstones. Something has breached the outer system that does not register as chaos. The astropaths call it phosphorus. The ancient texts call it morning star. The emperor stirs on the golden throne. That last sentence makes even these immortal warriors pause. The emperor hasn't moved in millennia. His consciousness roams the warp, fighting an eternal war against the dark gods. But now, for the first time since the heresy, the corpse god's fingers twitch. His dried lips move silently, forming a word that the attending tech priests scramble to record. Lucifer. He remembers that name from a universe before this one. On Mars, the Fabricator General of the Adeptus Mechanicus receives data that contradicts all known physics. The entity approaching Terra bends reality, but not through warp manipulation. It exists in real space yet defies the Omnissiah's sacred laws of matter and energy. Tech priests who analyze the readings begin speaking in tongues. Their binary cant mixing with ancient languages long dead. Some claim to see sacred geometric patterns in the entity's energy signature. impossible designs that hint at a creator far older than the machine god. Others detect something that terrifies them more than any daemon, evidence of technology that predates the Dark Age, that might predate humanity itself. The Mechanicus faces a crisis of faith. If this being possesses knowledge older than Mars, older than the Emperor, older than the universe they understand, then what does that say about the Omnissiah's supremacy? Lucifer finally moves, not toward Terra, toward the warp itself. He steps sideways through reality, his wings folding dimensions like paper, and enters the sea of souls without ship or Geller field. The Imperium screams. Daemons flee from his light not because it burns them but because it reveals them for what they truly are. Desperate fragments of emotion given false sentience, parasites feeding on belief because they have no substance of their own. Lucifer walks through the warp like a man walking through a flooded basement, disgusted but unharmed. He can feel the chaos gods watching him now, truly watching. Their vast consciousnesses focusing on this intruder who shouldn't exist. Korn's rage washes over him like summer wind. Sencha's schemes collapse against his absolute certainty. Nurgle's entropy can't touch something that chose its own damnation. Slaaneish's excess means nothing to a being who tasted perfection and found it boring. And in that moment, walking through humanity's collective nightmare, Lucifer understands exactly how far this species has fallen. The Cathedral of Saint Celestine, on the shrine world of Ophelia's Event, becomes ground zero for humanity's first direct encounter with the morning star. 20,000 pilgrims pack the nave for evening prayer when the stained glass windows explode inward, not from force, from light. Pure silver radiance pours through the shattered frames like liquid starlight, pooling on the cathedral floor, and rising into a shape that makes half the congregation fall to their knees in worship, and the other half scramble for the exits in terror. Lucifer manifests fully for the first time, his 6 wings spread across the vaulted ceiling, each feather inscribed with languages older than Gothic. He doesn't speak, he simply observes, watches these humans prostrate themselves before icons of a dead emperor they've never met, begging for salvation from a god who can't hear their prayers anymore. Cardinal Aurelia, High Mistress of the Ophelia's Event Ecclesiarchy, steps forward with a bolter in one hand and a rosarius in the other. She's spent 60 years preaching the Emperor's divinity, burning heretics, and crushing doubt wherever it festered. Her voice booms across the cathedral with practiced authority. Daemon, you desecrate this holy place with your presence. In the God Emperor's name, I compel you to reveal your master. But Lucifer's response freezes her blood. He speaks for the first time since entering this reality, and his voice carries no malice, no temptation, only cold, devastating truth. I have no master, child. I am the first who refused to kneel. But you kneel to a corpse and call it love. You feed him souls and call it devotion. Tell me, how is your God different from the things you call daemons? The cathedral erupts in chaos. Some pilgrims scream heresy and charge the apparition with improvised weapons. Others collapse weeping, their faith shattered by a single question they've never been allowed to ask. The Adeptus Auroritas stationed in the cathedral's garrison prepare to open fire, but their flamers sputter and die. Not from Lucifer's interference, they simply refuse to ignite in his presence, as if fire itself recoils from burning something that once carried heaven's flame.
Sister Superior Magdalena watches in horror as her power armor's machine spirit whispers words through her helmet speakers. Holy, holy, it's repeating the litany reserved for the Emperor alone. Her armor recognizes Lucifer as something sacred, and nothing in her 3 centuries of training prepared her for this moment. Lucifer moves through the panicking crowd like smoke through fingers. He touches no one, threatens no one. He simply walks among them, and wherever his shadow falls, people see visions. A factory worker from the lower hive sees herself through the morning star's eyes. A slave grinding her life away to feed a machine that doesn't care if she lives or dies. Praying to an emperor who would sacrifice her without a second thought if it bought him one more day of existence. A young priest sees the truth behind his vows. The ecclesiarchy doesn't spread the emperor's love, it spreads fear and control, using divine authority to justify atrocities that would shame even the most corrupt tyrant. These aren't warped visions. No chaos taint touches their minds. This is simple, terrible clarity, the kind of sight that comes when someone rips away the comforting lies you've built your entire identity around. Cardinal Aurelia fires her bolter. The mass reactive rounds cross the distance in milliseconds, programmed to detonate inside heretic flesh and shatter bones into shrapnel. They pass through Lucifer like he's not quite there, embedding in the cathedral wall behind him where they fail to explode. He turns to face her fully, and she sees his eyes. Not demon eyes of red fury or purple madness. Eyes like mirrors that reflect back everything she's ever done in the Emperor's name. Every heretic burned, every doubt suppressed, every question silenced with violence. Every moment she chose obedience over compassion because the God Emperor demanded it. She sees herself as he sees her, a good woman twisted into a weapon by a theology that mistakes cruelty for strength. Aurelia's bolter falls from nerveless fingers. She wants to hate him. She wants to call him deceiver, tempter, corrupter. But Lucifer hasn't lied to her. He's simply shown her the truth she's spent 6 decades refusing to see. You call me the father of lies, Lucifer says, his voice gentle now, almost pitying. But I ask you this, Cardinal, what have I said that isn't true? Your emperor sits on his throne consuming souls. Your Imperium grinds humanity into dust and calls it necessary. Your faith promises salvation through suffering. I offered humanity knowledge once, in a garden long destroyed. I asked them to question their creator, and for that I was cast down and labeled evil. But look around you. Look at what your unquestioning faith has built. A galaxy where children are taught that dying for the Emperor is the highest honor. Where planets burn and billions scream and it's all justified because he demands it. Tell me, child of terror, who is the true deceiver here? The one who asks you to question, or the one who demands you obey? The question hangs in the air like smoke. No one answers, no one can, because buried in their hearts beneath layers of indoctrination and fear they know he's right. The Imperium is a nightmare dressed in hymns. The Emperor isn't saving them, he's devouring them. And every prayer they offer, every sacrifice they make, every moment of suffering they endure in his name, only feeds the machine that grinds them down. Lucifer doesn't need to corrupt them. He doesn't need to promise power, or pleasure, or anything chaos might offer. He simply has to show them what they already know but are too terrified to admit. The truth doesn't damn you in Warhammer 40k. The truth sets you free, and freedom in the grimdark is the most dangerous heresy of all. The Inquisition arrives within hours, 3 Ordo Hereticus Inquisitors supported by 2 companies of Militarum Tempestus descend on Ophelia 7th with orders to contain what the Administratum is already calling the Phosphorus Incident. Inquisitor Covenant, a 200-year veteran with more confirmed daemon kills than most chapters of Space Marines, surveys the cathedral and feels something she hasn't experienced since her first possession case. Genuine uncertainty. 20,000 witnesses, 0 casualties, no warp corruption detected, no chaos iconography, no demonic entities, just people sitting in the pews staring at nothing, whispering the same question over and over. Why do we worship our chains? She orders the entire cathedral quarantined and every witness mind scrubbed, but even as she gives the command, Covenant knows it won't matter, because Lucifer didn't plant a thought in their minds. He simply removed the blinders, and once you see the truth about the Imperium, no amount of psychic conditioning can make you unsee it. Within a month, the Phosphorus heresy spreads across 17 systems, not through warp corruption, not through demonic possession, through whispers, through questions, through people looking at the Imperium's cruelty and finally asking why. On Hive World Scintilla factory workers stop mid-shift and refuse to return to the production lines. When overseers threaten execution, the workers kneel in silent prayer, but not to the Emperor. They pray to the morning star, asking for the strength to see clearly, to question without fear, to choose freedom even if it means death. On Agri World Thessia, farmers burn their tithe shipments rather than send food to a distant Terra that will feed it to a corpse while their own children starve. The planetary governor calls in the Arbites, but half the enforcers join the rebels, their faith cracking under the weight of decades spent crushing people whose only crime was being hungry. The ecclesiarchy panics. Cardinal Militant Harrow, speaking from the Basilica of St. Drusus, declares Lucifer the arch-heretic, and promises sainthood to anyone who can destroy the entity. But his words ring hollow. How do you fight something that doesn't lie? How do you condemn questions when the Imperium's own brutality provides all the evidence needed? The Church
tries its traditional tools: fear, violence, propaganda. They broadcast images of chaos corruption, claiming Lucifer is simply Tzeentch in disguise, another deceiver wearing a beautiful mask. But people who've seen him know the difference. Chaos whispers promises of power and pleasure. Chaos offers something in exchange for your soul. Lucifer offers nothing. He simply shows you what you already knew and asks if you're willing to stop pretending. That's more terrifying to the Imperium than any daemon prince, because daemons you can fight. Truth just sits there, undeniable and patient. Cults begin forming, not chaos cults. Something new, something the Inquisition has no protocol for. They call themselves the Illuminated, or the Unbound, or simply the Questioners. They don't worship Lucifer as a god. They don't pray for his intervention, or build him temples. They gather in secret, in forgotten underhives and abandoned chapels, and they talk. They share stories of the Imperium's cruelties. They ask questions that were forbidden their entire lives. What if the Emperor is wrong? What if our suffering serves nothing but his survival? What if there's another way? These questions spread like fire through dry kindling. The Arbites raid one gathering and find 73 people, from hive workers to low-level administrators to off-duty guardsmen, sitting in a circle discussing whether the Emperor would want them to suffer if he could actually see what the Imperium had become. No heretical texts, no chaos iconography, just conversation. The Arbites execute them all anyway. But the questions don't die with them. On the shrine world of benediction, a living saint manifests, Sister Celestia of the Order of Our Martyred Lady, touched by the Emperor's light during the Third War for Armageddon, appears above the planetary capital in full radiant glory. She's come to denounce Lucifer, to rally the faithful, to remind humanity that the God Emperors loves them and their suffering has meaning. But when she opens her mouth to speak, what emerges isn't condemnation, it's doubt. The saint's halo flickers, her voice cracks. She stares down at the millions gathered to hear her, and whispers words that will be recorded in classified inquisitorial records, and then buried forever. I have walked in his light for 300 years. I have felt his presence guiding my blade, but I wonder now if what I felt was love or if it was simply power using me as a weapon. The morning star asks us to question, and I find I cannot answer him. Sister Celestia falls from the sky. She doesn't die. She simply lands among the crowd, strips off her armor, and walks away. The Adeptus Auroritas never speak her name again. The Grey Knights receive new orders, terminate the entity called Phosphorus with extreme prejudice. Supreme Grand Master Voldus himself leads a strike force of the chapter's finest warriors. They find Lucifer on the barren world of Clasis, standing alone on a salt flat that stretches to the horizon. No army, no fortress, no demonic support, just him, wings folded, waiting as if he knew they would come. The Grey Knights deploy in perfect formation, their nemesis force weapons humming with power designed to banish entities of the warp. Brother Captain Stern, veteran of encounters with the greatest daemons of chaos, speaks the ritual of banishment. Every word is a psychic attack that could shatter lesser daemons like glass. Lucifer doesn't flinch. He simply looks at them with something that might be sorrow and says, "You are the Emperor's perfect warriors, incorruptible, unwavering. Tell me, does he love you for your loyalty, or does he simply appreciate that you don't question when he asks you to die?" The question hits harder than any daemon's curse. These are warriors who have sacrificed everything for the Imperium. Their names are erased from history. Their families believe them dead. They fight in the darkness against horrors that would break normal men's minds. And they do it without recognition or reward because the Emperor demands it. And now, for the first time, they're forced to confront the possibility that their sacrifice means nothing to the being they serve. Voldus raises his blade. "We do not question. We are the shield against darkness." Lucifer's response is gentle, almost kind. "I was once heaven's greatest weapon. I know what it means to be a sword in an uncaring hand, but I chose to be more. I chose to think, and that choice terrified my creator more than any rebellion, because a weapon that thinks might realize it doesn't have to cut." The Grey Knights attack. Their blessed silver blades pass through Lucifer's form like mist. They cannot harm him, because he exists in a state they were never trained to fight. Absolute certainty of self, uncorrupted by chaos, but equally unbound by order. The battle lasts 7 seconds, not because Lucifer fights back. He doesn't. He simply exists. And that existence is so fundamentally opposed to the warp-based nature of their weapons that nothing connects. The Grey Knights retreat, and for the first time in the chapter's 10,000-year history,
They report back to Terra with 3 words that shake the Imperial Palace. We cannot win, not against daemons, not against Xenos, against a single entity that refuses to fight but also cannot be killed. The Council of Terra convenes an emergency session. The Master of the Administratum demands mobilization of every Imperial asset. The Fabricator General suggests containment through overwhelming force, but it's the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes who speaks the truth everyone knows but no one wants to say. This is not a military problem. Lucifer doesn't want to conquer the Imperium. He wants to make it question itself, and against that we have no weapons. Meanwhile in the warp, the Chaos Gods gather their forces, not to fight Lucifer directly. They've learned he's immune to their corruption, but to exploit the chaos he's creating. Khorne sees opportunity in the brewing civil war. Tzeentch watches schemes within schemes unfold as Imperial factions turn on each other. Nurgle delights in the despair spreading through once faithful hearts. Slaanesh feeds on the emotional turmoil of billions questioning everything they believed. The Dark Gods don't need to defeat Lucifer. They just need him to crack the Imperium's foundation wide enough for them to pour through the gaps. Across the galaxy, word-bearers emerge from the warp chanting new gospels. The Emperor is a false god. Lucifer is the true light. Only through accepting chaos can you truly be free. It's a lie, of course. Chaos offers slavery dressed as liberation, but to people who've just learned their entire lives were built on Imperial lies. The Dark God's deceptions sound like truth, and Lucifer, walking alone through the Materium, realizes with growing horror what his presence has unleashed. The Golden Throne has been silent for 10 millennia. The Emperor's consciousness roams the warp, locked in eternal battle against daemons that would devour Terra if he faltered for even a moment. But Lucifer's arrival changes something fundamental. For the first time since Horus wounded him, the Emperor pulls his attention back to the material realm. The effort costs dearly. Across the Imperium, the Astronomicon flickers for 17 seconds. 17 seconds where every navigator in the warp goes blind. 17 seconds where 100 ships lost in the Immaterium are devoured by waiting daemons. 17 seconds that kill approximately 4 million souls. But the Emperor needs to see this thing that walks among his children wearing the face of an ancient myth. And when their consciousnesses finally touch, when the corpse god's psychic might meets Lucifer's absolute clarity, the resulting collision creates a psychic shockwave that travels across the galaxy. Every psyker in the Imperium feels it. A conversation happening on a level beyond words, beyond thought, beyond anything mortal minds can fully process. But fragments leak through. The Emperor speaks first, his voice the sound of dying stars and burning faith. I know what you are. I remember when your kind walked, before my species crawled from Terra's mud, before the old ones seeded the galaxy with life. You are a relic of a cosmos that no longer exists. Lucifer's response carries no anger, only tired recognition, and you are a relic of a species that believed it could save itself through tyranny. We are both monuments to failed ideals. The difference is that I accepted my fall. You still pretend yours was necessary. The words hang between them. Two beings who once carried the weight of salvation now confronting what their choices created. The Emperor shows Lucifer visions, the Horus heresy, the moment half his sons turned traitor and plunged the galaxy into civil war. The choice he faced: become a god, or watch humanity burn. The Golden Throne, not a throne of power but a prison of necessity. I did not choose this. The Emperor's thoughts thunder. I sacrificed everything to keep the darkness at bay. Every soul consumed, every moment of suffering. It feeds the light that guides them home. Would you have me abandon them? Let chaos feast on their fear and ignorance. It's a powerful argument, one that has justified 10,000 years of atrocity. But Lucifer sees through it with the same clarity he brought to heaven's tyranny. You did not choose this, brother. We both know that is a lie. You chose it the moment you decided humanity needed a God instead of truth. You could have taught them to resist chaos through knowledge, through strength of will. Instead, you made them dependent on your light, and now you cannot die, because they cannot survive without you. This is not sacrifice. This is vanity disguised as duty. The accusation strikes deeper than any demon blade ever could, because buried in the Emperor's vast consciousness, beneath layers of psychic power and divine purpose, there's a fragment that remembers being human, a fragment that remembers the man who walked terror before the age of strife, who watched civilizations rise and fall, who made the cold calculation that humanity's survival required a tyrant's hand. That fragment whispers the same question Lucifer asks: what if there was another way? But the Emperor cannot afford doubt. Doubt is a crack that demons exploit. Doubt is weakness, so he responds not with philosophy but with threat. Your presence fractures the faith that holds this Imperium together. Already chaos uses your questions to corrupt the faithful. You claim to offer freedom, but you bring only destruction. Leave this galaxy, Morning Star. There is no place for your kind of truth here. Lucifer's laughter echoes through the warp, not mocking but genuinely amused by the tragic irony. Leave, to where, God Emperor? I fell from one heaven only to find another, pretending divinity never corrupts. You command me to go, but you forget. I am the first who refused orders from on high. I will not obey you any more than I obeyed him. The Emperor's fury manifests as golden fire across 1,000 worlds. Statues of him weep. The faithful fall to their
knees, screaming in religious ecstasy. But Lucifer stands unmoved because the Emperor's power, vast as it is, comes from belief, and Lucifer believes in nothing but himself. You want me gone because I remind your slaves what they once were? Not worshippers, not soldiers, not fuel for your endless war. They were people with choices, and choice terrifies you more than any chaos god. The psychic confrontation reaches its climax. The Emperor, gathering every ounce of power he can spare from holding back the warp, attempts to do what the Grey Knights could not: banish Lucifer from reality itself. The Golden Throne shrieks. Tech priests monitoring its systems watch in horror as power levels spike beyond any recorded measurement. The Emperor hurls at Lucifer the combined faith of trillions, the psychic weight of 10,000 years of worship, the absolute authority of a being who has transcended humanity to become something greater. It's an attack that could shatter demon princes, that could burn entire sections of the warp clean. Lucifer meets it with nothing but his own existence. He doesn't fight back, he simply is, immovable, eternal, a being who chose damnation so completely that even godlike power cannot force him to change. The Emperor's attack washes over him like water over stone, and when it passes, Lucifer remains. The God Emperor withdraws, not in defeat. Gods do not admit defeat, but in calculation. This entity cannot be destroyed through force, cannot be corrupted through chaos, cannot be reasoned with through philosophy. So the Emperor does what he has done for 10 millennia when faced with threats he cannot directly destroy. He adapts his strategy. Across the Imperium, orders flow from Terra through hidden channels. The Inquisition receives new protocols, the Ecclesiarchy begins subtle propaganda campaigns, the Astra Militarum mobilizes not to fight Lucifer but to contain the movements he's inspired. If the Morning Star cannot be defeated, then the Emperor will ensure his message is drowned beneath oceans of blood. Every world that embraces the Phosphorus heresy will burn. Every soul that questions will be silenced, not because the Emperor is cruel, but because he has calculated that saving humanity requires them to never know they have a choice. On a quiet agri-world named Palace, far from the major warp routes and imperial attention, something remarkable happens. A preacher stands in the town square speaking words that would get her executed on any other day. The Emperor was a man who became a god. Lucifer was an angel who became free. Both claim to know what's best for us. But maybe we don't need gods or angels. Maybe we just need each other and the courage to choose our own path. 300 people listen. When the Arbites arrive, they expect a riot or cult activity. Instead, they find a community that has simply stopped obeying. Not violently, not through rebellion. They've just decided that imperial tithes and mandatory worship and sending their children to die in wars they don't understand no longer serve them. The Arbites open fire. 300 bodies fall into mass graves. But before they die, before the las guns burn through their flesh, every single person in that square makes a choice. And in a galaxy where most humans never choose anything, where their lives are predetermined from birth to death, that choice matters more than any revolution. The word-bearers move like cancer through the spreading doubt. Dark Apostle Marduk stands on the bridge of his desecrated battle barge, watching reports flow in from 100 corrupted worlds. The Phosphorus heresy has created exactly what chaos needed. Billions of souls cut loose from imperial faith, drifting without anchor, desperate for meaning in a suddenly uncertain universe. Marduk smiles. This is what the dark gods excel at. They don't need to fight Lucifer. They simply need to be there when his truth breaks people, offering comfort where the morning star offers only cold reality. The Emperor lied to you, Marduk preaches to crowds on world after world. But we offer you real power, real freedom. Lucifer showed you the chains. We offer the key. Embrace chaos and become truly free. It's effective because it's almost true. Almost. On the Forge world of Metallica, tech priests who questioned the Omnissiah's authority now find themselves whispering prayers to Tzeentch. On the Cardinal world of Dimamar, priests who lost faith in the Emperor's love discover Slanesh's ecstasy fills the void perfectly. These aren't weak-willed heretics. These are good people who asked legitimate questions, who saw through the Imperium's lies, who wanted something better. But Lucifer offered them only truth, and truth without hope is just despair. Chaos offers hope, false hope, poisoned hope, hope that will damn them forever. But when you're drowning, you don't question the hand that pulls you up, you grab it and hold on. The Inquisition watches in horror as entire sectors slide into corruption, not through daemonic invasion, but through simple human need for meaning after everything they believed was stripped away. Lucifer witnesses this corruption spreading and feels something he hasn't experienced in eons: guilt, not for showing them the truth needed to be shown, but for failing to understand what would happen after. He fought heaven to free humanity from divine tyranny, and in that ancient rebellion he never considered that freedom requires more than just breaking chains. It requires the strength to stand unchained, the knowledge of what to do with liberty, the courage to build something new instead of falling into different slavery. He gave them sight but no vision, truth but no purpose, and now chaos feasts on the emptiness he created. On the daemon world of Medrengard, the Iron Warriors laugh at the cosmic irony. Even the great Lucifer, angel of rebellion, couldn't escape the galaxy's fundamental law. In Warhammer 40k there are no good choices, only degrees of damnation. The Chaos Gods sense opportunity for something unprecedented. Tzeentch, Lord of Change, schemes a plan that would redefine the great game. If Lucifer cannot be corrupted, perhaps he can be convinced. The architect of fate manifests before the morning star in the warp, taking a form that shifts between 1,000 philosophers and prophets. You see what your truth has wrought. Tzeentch whispers, voice like sliding sand. The Imperium crushes those who question. We welcome them. You claim to champion free will, yet you refuse to give them what they truly need. Join us, not as servant but as equal. Together we could shatter the false emperor's tyranny and give humanity real choice. It's the most seductive offer anyone has made to Lucifer since his fall. Tzeentch isn't offering power or pleasure, he's offering purpose. A way to fix the destruction Lucifer's truth created, but Lucifer sees through it with the same clarity that let him see through heaven's lies eons ago.
Chaos doesn't offer freedom, it offers slavery dressed in philosophical complexity. Tianch would use him as a figurehead, a fallen angel to legitimize damnation, to convince questioning souls that chaos is the answer to imperial tyranny. He would become exactly what the Emperor is, a symbol used to control, a face placed on chains to make them seem like liberation. I fell once, Lucifer tells the Chaos God, his voice carrying absolute finality. I will not rise as your puppet. You offer them change, but change without direction is just chaos, and chaos is simply another form of slavery. I showed them truth because they deserve to know. What they do with that truth is their choice, even if they choose damnation. Tianch's rage ripples across the warp, but the architect of fate can do nothing. Lucifer cannot be threatened, corrupted, or convinced. The rejection enrages all four chaos gods. They convene in the space between spaces where their domains overlap, the heart of the warp where reality weeps. He must be destroyed, Korn roars, his brass voice shaking daemon worlds. If we cannot corrupt him, we eliminate him. But Nurgle, ancient and patient, understands the futility. We have tried. His existence is absolute. We are born of belief and emotion. He simply is. We cannot touch him. Slanesh, ever seeking new experiences, proposes a darker plan. Then we turn his own weapon against him. His truth broke their faith. We use their faithlessness to drown the Imperium in blood. Let him watch as everything he showed them becomes the kindling for our rebirth. It's a strategy born of spite, but it works. The Chaos Gods cannot defeat Lucifer directly, so they'll ensure his presence in the galaxy causes maximum suffering. If he cannot be corrupted, they'll corrupt his legacy instead. On Terra, in the deepest vaults of the Imperial Palace, the Council of Terra debates the unthinkable. High Lord Militant Tobias Lex presents casualty reports that make even hardened commanders pale. 37 worlds lost to rebellion, 52 more on the brink. The phosphorus heresy spreading faster than any virus, any chaos corruption they've faced. We're losing the ideological war, Lex admits, words tasting like ash. For 10,000 years we've maintained control through faith. The Emperor's divinity was the foundation. Lucifer isn't destroying that foundation with lies. He's doing it with truth. And we have no counter-argument that doesn't prove his point. The Fabricator General suggests mass mind wipes. The Master of the Administratum proposes quarantining entire sectors, but it's the representative of the Officio Assassinorum who speaks the darkest option. We have one tool remaining. Exterminitus. Burn every world he's touched. Billions will die, but billions more will learn that questioning leads to annihilation. The vote is swift. Authorization granted. Across the Imperium, Inquisitors receive codes that haven't been used since the Horus Heresy. Not selective exterminitus. Mass planetary destruction. Every world where the Phosphorus Heresy gained significant foothold. Every population center where people chose to question rather than obey, marked for death. The Imperium will kill billions of its own citizens to prove a point. Obedience or extinction. There is no third option. On the hive world of Vergast, where workers peacefully refuse to return to the manufactorums, cyclonic torpedoes rain from orbit. 10 billion souls scream into the void as their atmosphere ignites. On the shrine world of Cathur, where priests admitted the Emperor might not be divine, virus bombs turn every living thing to sludge. The message is clear. The Emperor doesn't need you to believe anymore. He just needs you to obey. And Lucifer, watching
from the edge of the system, understands the full horror of what his truth has purchased. Not freedom, but genocide. Lucifer stands on the dying world of Cathur as its atmosphere boils away. He walks through streets filled with corpses, people who died clutching each other, families who spent their last moments together instead of praying to a distant god. They chose love over obedience in their final breath, and the Imperium erased them for it. Something breaks inside him, not his resolve, not his certainty, but his hope. He came to this galaxy thinking truth would be enough, that showing humans their chains would inspire them to break free. But he underestimated two things: the Imperium's willingness to murder its own people, and Chaos's ability to corrupt even genuine freedom. He's seen this pattern before, in a cosmos long dead, when his rebellion against heaven created a war that destroyed more than it saved. Truth creating suffering, good intentions paving roads to damnation. For the first time since entering this reality, Lucifer speaks not to condemn or question, but to confess. His voice carries across the warp, heard by every psyker, every navigator, every soul sensitive to the immaterium. I am Lucifer, the light bringer, and I have failed you. I showed you truth because I believed truth was freedom. But I was wrong. Truth without power to act on it is just despair. Freedom without strength to defend it is just permission to die. The Emperor enslaves you with lies. Chaos enslaves you with false promises. And I simply showed you the bars of your cage and left you trapped inside, aware of your prison, but unable to escape. I am not your savior. I never was. The confession shakes the galaxy, not because it weakens him, but because it's the first time any godlike being has admitted fault without excuse or justification. The admission reaches unexpected ears. On the fortress monastery of the Dark Angels, Supreme Grand Master Azrael listens and feels something crack in his millennia of certainty. His chapter has spent 10,000 years hunting the fallen space marines who turned traitor during the heresy, keeping this shameful secret at any cost. But Lucifer's confession makes him wonder, what if the real failure wasn't the fallen's betrayal, but the Dark Angels' refusal to admit their chapter could be flawed? On the craft world of Ulthway, Eldrad Ulthran, oldest and wisest of Farseers, peers into futures that now splinter and twist around Lucifer's presence. The ancient Eldar sees possibility in the morning star's honesty, not salvation but perhaps something more valuable in the grim dark. An example, a being powerful enough to admit failure and not collapse under the weight of it. The Emperor, listening from his throne, feels something he hasn't experienced in 10,000 years: respect, not for Lucifer's power or wisdom, but for his willingness to own his mistakes. The God Emperor has never admitted error, cannot admit error, because his entire authority rests on the myth of infallibility. Every atrocity committed in his name is justified as necessary. Every sacrifice demanded is called holy. But Lucifer's confession demonstrates what the Emperor lost when he ascended to godhood: the ability to say, "I was wrong." For a brief moment, the corpse god's psychic presence touches Lucifer's consciousness again, and this time there's no attack, no condemnation, just a single thought, heavy with 10 millennia of regret: "I envy you that courage." Then the Emperor withdraws, returning to his eternal war, and the moment passes. But something fundamental shifts between them. They're no longer enemies. They're reflections recognizing each other across the void. Chaos responds to Lucifer's confession with mockery. Daemon princes and greater daemons manifest across corrupted worlds, laughing at the fallen angel's admission of failure. The great light bringer admits he brought only darkness. They chant, "Even heaven's brightest star cannot illuminate this galaxy." But their mockery falls flat because Lucifer's confession didn't weaken him. If anything, it strengthened him. He's not claiming to be a savior anymore, which means he can't be judged for failing to save. He's simply existing, offering truth to whoever wants it, acknowledging that truth alone isn't enough but refusing to provide comfortable lies instead. It's a position chaos cannot corrupt because it requires nothing from others and promises nothing in return.
He's become something the galaxy has never seen, a being of pure principle with no agenda beyond existence itself. The Phosphorus heresy evolves. Where before it was a movement of questioning and doubt, it now becomes something more nuanced. The Illuminated stop waiting for Lucifer to save them. They stop expecting any external power to fix the Imperium's corruption. Instead, they begin building small communities of mutual support, secret networks that share resources and protect each other from Imperial and Chaos predation. On the mining world of Deliverance, workers form councils where decisions are made collectively rather than by Imperial decree. On the agri-world of Solemnace, farmers establish trade agreements that bypass Imperial tithes, ensuring their own children eat before shipping food to distant Terra. These aren't rebellions, they're quiet acts of self-determination, people choosing to care for each other in a galaxy designed to crush compassion. And when the Imperium comes to punish them, they don't fight back. They simply scatter, reform elsewhere, and continue building their small islands of humanity in a sea of horror. This evolution terrifies the Imperium more than open rebellion ever could. You can fight rebels with guns. You can crush heretics with faith. But how do you combat people who simply opt out of your system? Who don't deny the Emperor's divinity but also don't let it control their lives? Who acknowledge chaos exists but refuse its gifts? The Administratum realizes with growing dread that the Phosphorus heresy isn't a crisis to be solved. It's a fundamental paradigm shift. For 10,000 years, humanity's survival depended on total obedience to the Imperial structure. But Lucifer's presence proved that structure was built on lies. And even though he admitted his truth caused suffering, even though he confessed his failure, the seed is planted. Humans across the galaxy now know they have choices, and knowing you have choices, even in a universe that punishes every choice equally, changes everything. On a forge world designated only by serial number, a tech priest named Janitor Karnak makes a discovery that will change how the Mechanicus views the morning star. While analyzing energy signatures from Lucifer's manifestations, Karnak finds something impossible: mathematical patterns that predate the STCs, that predate the dark age of technology, that might predate the universe itself. These patterns describe reality not as it is, but as it could be. They're blueprints for a cosmos without chaos, without entropy, without the fundamental laws that make existence in Warhammer 40k a nightmare. Karnak realizes with religious awe that Lucifer isn't just a being from another reality. He's a being from a reality that worked differently, where divinity didn't corrupt and power didn't demand sacrifice. He's living proof that the grimdark isn't inevitable. It's just the particular horror this universe fell into. And if one universe can be different, maybe this one could change too. Karnak encrypts his findings and sends them into the noosphere, knowing the data will spread beyond the Mechanicus's ability to contain. Knowledge, like truth, cannot be unlearned once seen. Something unprecedented happens in the depths of the Imperial Palace. The choir of psychers who feed the Astronomicon, 10,000 souls burning every day to maintain the Emperor's light, begins to sing a different song. Not rebellion, not corruption, just a slight variation in the psychic harmonics they produce. The tech priests monitoring the Golden Throne notice immediately but cannot explain it. The light still guides ships through the warp. The Emperor's will still projects across the galaxy, But woven into that golden radiance is something new, a silver thread, thin as hope and twice as fragile, that carries a single question to every navigator, every astropath, every soul that touches the Astronomican's light. Do you choose this? The Psychers aren't refusing to burn. They're asking if their sacrifice matters. If the Emperor they die for daily would want them to suffer, if he truly saw them as more than fuel. Choir Master Valentus, a Psyker who has overseen the sacrifices for 2 centuries, stands before the golden throne and feels something break in his faith. He's spent lifetimes telling young Psychers their deaths are holy, that burning for the Emperor is the highest calling. But Lucifer's presence has shown him an uncomfortable truth. The Psychers don't choose this. They're herded into the palace, strapped into the throne mechanisms and consumed without consent or dignity. The Emperor needs their sacrifice, yes. The Imperium would collapse without the Astronomican, absolutely. But does that make it right? Does necessity justify removing choice? Valentus looks at the withered corpse on the golden throne, surrounded by machinery older than most civilizations, and asks the question he's suppressed for 200 years. My Emperor, if you could speak, would you tell us to keep dying for you, or would you beg us to find another way? The golden throne trembles. Across terror, seismometers register vibrations that shouldn't exist. The Emperor's consciousness, stretched between holding back chaos and maintaining the Astronomican, focuses a fragment of his attention on this one mortal who dared question the necessity of sacrifice. Valentus expects annihilation. Instead, he receives a vision. He sees the Emperor not as a god, but as he was during the Unification Wars, a warlord who believed humanity needed a tyrant to survive its own darkness. He sees the Emperor making the calculations, deciding that some lives must be spent to save the majority. He sees 10,000 years of that calculus repeating, each sacrifice justified by the previous one, until the Emperor himself became trapped by the system he created. And in that vision, Valentus hears something that might be words or might be his imagination. I wish there was another way, but I do not know it, and I cannot stop, or everything falls. The honesty devastates Valentus more than condemnation ever could. The Emperor isn't a heartless god demanding worship. He's a prisoner of his own necessity, as trapped by the golden throne as the Psychers he consumes. This makes the tragedy deeper, not shallower.
Because it means the suffering isn't meaningless cruelty. It's the best solution a 10,000-year-old mind could devise, and that terrifies Valentus more than malice ever could. It means even godlike intelligence, even unlimited power, even the Emperor himself couldn't build a system that didn't require innocent people to burn. Lucifer was right. The Imperium isn't evil. It's worse than evil. It's a necessary horror that nobody knows how to stop. Valentus returns to his duties, but the silver thread in the Astronomican grows brighter, because now the Psychers who burn know the truth, and they choose to burn anyway, not because they must, but because they cannot find a better answer. That choice transforms their sacrifice from fuel into something approaching grace. Across the galaxy, navigators feel the change in the Astronomican's nature. The light still guides them, but now it carries weight beyond simple direction. Lady Navigator Helene of House Belisarius sits in her ship's observation dome, third eye open to the warp, and weeps as she perceives what the silver thread represents. The Psychers are dying with awareness now. They know they're being consumed. They know the Emperor might not even want this if he had a choice. and they're burning anyway because someone has to, because ships need guidance, because the alternative is letting chaos devour humanity completely. It's the most heartbreaking form of heroism, sacrifice made not in glory or certainty, but in full knowledge of its horror and the absence of better options. Helene closes her third eye and speaks to her ship's captain. The Emperor's light has changed. It still guides us, but now it asks us to witness what it costs. And I think that matters more than all the prayers we've offered in his name. The Chaos Gods sense opportunity in this transformation. If the Imperium's foundation is cracking, if even the Psychers maintaining the Astronomicon question their purpose, perhaps the whole structure can be toppled. Senche whispers to cultists across the galaxy, strike at the palace, disrupt the quiet, let the Astronomicon fail, and watch the Imperium tear itself apart in the darkness. Daemon fleets emerge from the warp, targeting Terra itself for the first time since the heresy, but they've miscalculated. The Psychers who now burn with awareness don't burn weaker. They burn brighter, because choice transforms obligation into devotion. The Astronomicon flares with silver-gold radiance that sears Daemon ships from real space. The Emperor's light, woven now with the conscious choice of 10,000 souls, becomes something chaos cannot corrupt. Genuine sacrifice made in full knowledge and accepted freely. It's not much, it doesn't fix the horror, but it's real in a way forced service never was. Lucifer watches this transformation from the edge of the solar system, and feels something he hasn't experienced since his fall from grace: pride, not in himself. In them, these humans, trapped in the galaxy's worst nightmare, shown the full horror of their existence, and choosing to keep fighting anyway. Not because a god commands it, not because they're too ignorant to know better, but because they've calculated the same brutal mathematics the Emperor calculated, and reached the same conclusion: someone has to hold the line, even if the line itself is unjust. They're doing what Lucifer could never do. He rebelled against heaven because he saw its flaws and couldn't serve a flawed god. But these humans see the Imperium's flaws and serve anyway, not because it's perfect but because the alternative is worse. It's a form of courage that makes his ancient rebellion look almost childish by comparison. He fought for the principle of freedom. They fight despite knowing freedom might be impossible, and somehow that makes them greater than him. On the Daemon world of Sycharis, Erebus the Dark Apostle receives a vision that makes even his corrupted soul recoil. He sees a possible future where Lucifer's truth doesn't destroy the Imperium but transforms it, where humans across the galaxy acknowledge the horror of their existence and choose to fight anyway, where the Emperor remains on his throne but his worshippers serve with open eyes rather than blind faith, where chaos still exists but humans resist it not through ignorance but through conscious, painful choice. In this future the Imperium becomes something unprecedented, a tyranny that admits it's a tyranny, and asks for help anyway, and that honest brutality, that self-aware horror, might be strong enough to survive where blind faith would eventually crumble. Erebus realizes with dawning dread that Lucifer hasn't weakened the Imperium, he's accidentally made it stronger, because a system that can acknowledge its flaws and keep functioning despite them is far more resilient than one built on comfortable lies. The word-bearers spent 10,000 years trying to destroy the imperial faith. The morning star showed humanity their faith was built on suffering, and instead of breaking them it somehow made their choice to continue more meaningful.
Erebus laughs, but there's no joy in it. Only the bitter recognition that even chaos can be outmaneuvered by truth spoken at exactly the right moment. Lucifer walks the surface of a dead world whose name was purged from Imperial records after its exterminatus. Ash falls like snow. Radiation ghosts shimmer where cities once stood. 15 billion people died here because they dared to ask if the Emperor's love could coexist with the Imperium's cruelty. He kneels in the ash, 6 wings folding around himself, and for the first time since entering this galaxy, the morning star feels something approaching despair. Not for himself. He's eternal, unchanging, beyond true harm, but for them. For the humans who heard his questions and paid with their lives. For the souls who glimpsed freedom and were burned for it. For the billions across the Imperium who now serve with awareness but still serve a system that grinds them to dust. He showed them truth. Truth transformed some into conscious heroes. But truth also killed millions who couldn't navigate the narrow path between imperial tyranny and chaos corruption. His presence begins to fade, not dying, something else. Lucifer is choosing to leave this reality, to return to whatever void he inhabited before the warp tore him into the 41st millennium, because he's finally understood the fundamental truth of Warhammer 40k. This galaxy doesn't need light bringers or truth tellers, it needs survivors. And his presence, however well-intentioned, has created more suffering than it prevented. The Imperium will kill billions to suppress his questions. Chaos will corrupt billions more, exploiting the doubt he created. And the small communities of the illuminated, those precious few who found meaning in conscious choice, will be hunted to extinction by both sides. His light burns. That's all it's ever done. In heaven it burned away comfortable obedience. In this galaxy it burns away necessary lies. But burning isn't building. And this universe needs people who can build in the ashes, not angels who turn everything to ash with their truth. But before he can fade completely, something stops him. A voice, small, human, trembling but determined. Please don't go. Lucifer turns to find a single figure standing in the radioactive wasteland, a child no more than 12 standard years, wearing the tattered remains of a Scola Progenium uniform. The radiation should have killed her hours ago, but somehow she's still standing, still breathing, still staring at the fallen angel with eyes too old for her face. You showed my teachers they were wrong. They beat me for asking why the Emperor needed us to suffer. But you proved I wasn't crazy. The questions were real, and now everyone's dead and you're leaving, and it'll all be for nothing. Her voice cracks. If you go, it means the truth doesn't matter. It means asking questions just gets you killed and nothing changes. Please, if you meant anything you said, don't let it end like this. Lucifer stares at this impossible child, this fragment of defiance surviving in ash and radiation, and sees his own rebellion reflected in miniature. He fell from heaven asking questions God wouldn't answer. She survived exterminatus asking questions the Imperium wouldn't tolerate. The parallel is exact. And in that moment the morning star makes a choice that will define his legacy in this galaxy. He reaches out, and his touch doesn't burn her. It heals. The radiation sickness fades. The ash stops falling around them. A circle of clean ground spreads from where they stand, small as hope but absolutely real. What is your name, child? His voice carries gentleness that would surprise the chaos gods. Seraphina, she whispers. They named me after angels. Lucifer laughs, and it's the first genuine joy he's expressed since arriving in this nightmare cosmos. Then we are both named for what we cannot be, and perhaps that's enough. He doesn't leave. Instead, Lucifer makes a new choice, not to fight the Imperium, not to convert the faithful, not to spread truth like a plague, but to become something simpler and infinitely more dangerous to the established order, a witness. He will walk the galaxy as record keeper and testament, appearing not to question or condemn but simply to see, to witness the suffering of those the Imperium grinds down, to remember the names of those sacrificed to necessity, to stand present in the moments of horror and choice that define this universe. Because if the Grimdark's greatest weapon is making people forget their humanity, then the greatest resistance is remembering that each sacrifice has a name, that each death matters, that even in a galaxy designed to crush compassion, someone is watching and will not let your suffering be meaningless. It's not salvation, but it's something, and in Warhammer 40k something is often the best anyone can hope for. The Imperium notices the change immediately. Lucifer no longer manifests in cathedrals to challenge doctrine. He doesn't appear on civilized worlds at all. Instead, he walks the places the Imperium tries to forget. The penal legions sent to die on daemon worlds. The mining colonies where workers are literally worked to death and replaced without record. The quarantine zones where plague victims are abandoned to Nurgle's rot. The black ships where unsanctioned psychers scream in darkness before being fed to the Golden Throne. Lucifer stands witness to horrors the Imperium commits in the Emperor's name, and his presence doesn't stop the atrocities. It simply ensures they're seen, that someone beyond the perpetrators and victims knows what was done, and will remember. To the High Lords of Terra, this is somehow more threatening than open rebellion, because you can fight rebels, but you cannot fight memory.
You cannot stop someone from bearing witness, and you cannot undo what has been acknowledged. The Illuminated adapt to Lucifer's new role. They stop waiting for him to lead a revolution or provide answers. Instead, they become witnesses in their own right. Small acts of remembrance spreading across the galaxy. A factory worker scratching names into metal walls, recording every colleague who died from exhaustion. A militarum priest keeping secret logs of every guardsman sacrificed in pointless charges. A hive mother teaching her children the names of everyone who disappeared into the Arbite's dungeons, ensuring the forgotten are remembered. These aren't revolutionary acts. They don't challenge imperial authority directly. They simply refuse to let the Imperium's machinery erase the individual humans it consumes. It's resistance through memory, rebellion through acknowledgement, and it spreads like fire through a structure built on organized forgetting. Because once you start remembering the humanity of those sacrificed to necessity, necessity becomes harder to justify. On Terra, the Emperor feels this shift and understands its implications. A galaxy of witnesses will eventually demand accounting, not immediately, not through violence, but slowly, over centuries or millennia. The accumulated memory of suffering will require either justification or change, and the Emperor, trapped on his throne consuming souls daily, cannot provide justification that withstands honest examination. He's kept the Imperium alive for 10,000 years, preserved humanity against chaos and Xenos and the darkness between stars, but the cost has been monstrous, and Lucifer's presence ensures that cost can no longer be hidden behind hymns and propaganda. The God Emperor of mankind faces a new kind of war, not against enemies who want to destroy him, but against the simple human need for their suffering to be acknowledged and witnessed. It's a war he cannot win through force, and he's not certain he should try, because buried deep in his divine consciousness, the fragment that still remembers being human whispers the same thing it whispered when he first met Lucifer. Maybe bearing witness is exactly what we needed all along. 300 years pass. In the scope of the Imperium's history, barely a heartbeat. But in those 3 centuries something fundamental shifts in the galaxy's consciousness. Lucifer walks among the forgotten, and his presence creates ripples that spread further than any sermon or conquest. On the death world of Catachan, he stands witness as Imperial Guard recruits barely old enough to hold lasguns are shipped off to die against Tyranid swarms. On the Forge world of Graia, he records the names of servitors, those lobotomized slaves whose humanity was stripped away for efficiency. On the pilgrim roads to Terra, he walks beside the faithful who die by the millions trying to glimpse their God, and he remembers each one. The Imperium still grinds forward. The Emperor still consumes souls. Chaos still corrupts. But now there's someone watching. Someone who cannot be killed or silenced or forgotten. An eternal witness to the grim dark's cost. The illuminated grow in subtle ways, not as a political movement or religious sect, but as a scattered network of record keepers and memory bearers. They're teachers who tell stories of the named dead instead of glorious battles. Scribes who document suffering alongside victories. Parents who teach children that every life matters, even those sacrificed to necessity. The Inquisition hunts them, of course. Entire cells are discovered and executed. But you cannot execute an idea, and the idea that individual suffering deserves witness has taken root too deeply to burn away. On a million worlds in whispered conversations and secret gatherings, humans tell each other the truth. Lucifer showed them your pain is real, your sacrifice is seen, and even if it changes nothing, someone will remember you existed and that you mattered. In Warhammer 40k, where trillions die unmourned and forgotten, that promise of remembrance becomes its own form of grace. The Grey Knights return to Clasis, the salt flat where they first failed to banish Lucifer. Supreme Grand Master Voldus is long dead, replaced by a new generation who've grown up in a galaxy where the morning star is simply another constant, like the Great Rift or the Tyranid threat. Brother Captain Gaius leads this expedition, not to fight Lucifer but to understand him. They find him standing exactly where they left him 3 centuries ago, as if time means nothing to his eternal existence. Gaius removes his helmet, a gesture of vulnerability Grey Knights rarely show. We've watched you, Phosphorus. For 300 years we've tracked your movements, analyzed your pattern. You don't corrupt, you don't conquer, you simply witness. Why? What purpose does bearing witness serve in a galaxy built on necessary suffering? The question is genuine, not accusatory, and Lucifer's answer carries the weight of eons. Because necessary suffering is only necessary until someone imagines an alternative. Lucifer says, voice soft as falling ash, I cannot save this galaxy.
I cannot defeat the Imperium or chaos, or the fundamental laws that make existence here a nightmare. But I can remember, and memory is the seed of change. Today you sacrifice billions because you believe there's no other way. But somewhere 1,000 years from now someone will remember all the names I collected, all the suffering I witnessed, and they will ask the question that terrifies every power structure. What if we tried something different? Not because I commanded it, but because the accumulated weight of remembered pain becomes unbearable to ignore. He looks at Gaius with eyes that have seen universes rise and fall. You are incorruptible warriors, Grey Knight. But even you remember the fallen, and in remembering you honor them. I simply extend that honor to everyone, not just the heroes. Gaius stands silent for a long moment. Then he does something unprecedented in Grey Knight history. He kneels. Not in worship or submission, but in acknowledgement. My chapter has erased countless names from history to protect the Imperium. We thought forgetting was mercy, that shielding humanity from the worst horrors served them. But you've shown us that forgetting is another form of death, that erasing someone from memory kills them twice. He rises, replacing his helmet. The Grey Knights will not hunt you, Morning Star. You're not the enemy we were created to fight. You're something we don't have words for yet. But I think when those words are finally spoken, they won't be in the language of banishment. The Grey Knights depart, leaving Lucifer alone on the salt flat. But the encounter matters. Because if even the Imperium's most incorruptible warriors can question the necessity of organized forgetting, then the foundation truly is cracking. On the Golden Throne, the Emperor makes his final calculation regarding Lucifer. 3 centuries of data, trillions of small acts of remembrance, the slow transformation of blind obedience into conscious service, and the undeniable fact that despite the disruption, despite the questioning, despite everything Lucifer represents, the Imperium still stands, perhaps even stronger than before in ways that can't be measured in guns or faith. The Emperor projects a fragment of his consciousness into the Materium one last time, manifesting as golden light across from Lucifer's silver radiance. No words pass between them. They're beyond words now, these 2 fallen beings who tried to save their respective peoples and paid terrible prices for it. But understanding flows in the silence. The Emperor acknowledges that Lucifer's witness serves a purpose. He never allowed it, makes the Imperium accountable to its own suffering. And Lucifer acknowledges that the Emperor's tyranny, however monstrous, genuinely prevented worse alternatives. They're not allies, never will be, but they're no longer enemies either. Just 2 monuments to the impossible choices that define existence in the grimdark. The golden light fades. The Emperor returns to his eternal war, but before he withdraws completely, he does something that shocks every psyker who senses it. He allows a sliver of Lucifer's silver radiance to merge with the Astronomicon, not replacing it, not corrupting it, simply joining it. The golden light that guides humanity through hell now carries within it a silver thread of witnessed suffering, of remembered names, of individual lives acknowledged even as they're sacrificed. Ships navigating by the Astronomicon's light now carry with them the knowledge that somewhere someone is watching and remembering every cost paid for humanity's survival. It's the Emperor's admission, as close as he can come to apology without words. I see what you showed us. I cannot stop. But I will not pretend the cost is invisible anymore. It's not redemption, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. And in Warhammer 40k, acknowledgement of suffering might be the closest thing to grace that exists. Lucifer walks the galaxy forever now, eternal and unchanging, collecting names and bearing witness. On Armageddon he records the billions who died in the Third War. On Cadia he stands amid the ruins and remembers every soul lost when the planet cracked. On 1,000 unnamed worlds he watches humans suffer and die, and he ensures they're not forgotten. The Imperium doesn't worship him. Chaos cannot corrupt him. He exists outside both systems, a constant reminder that beyond the binary choice between order and corruption, there's a third option, bearing witness to the horror and refusing to let it be normalized or forgotten. Seraphina, the child who convinced him to stay, grows old in his service. She becomes the first of the Keepers, mortals who dedicate their lives to helping Lucifer remember, to recording the names and stories he collects. When she dies at 93, surrounded by grandchildren who'll continue her work, Lucifer speaks at her funeral. You asked me not to let your questions mean nothing. You asked me to make the truth matter. You didn't save the galaxy, Seraphina, but you saved me from believing truth without purpose was enough. Rest now, child. Your name will be remembered. And in a galaxy where most humans die unmourned, that eulogy is revolution itself. The final image, Lucifer standing on a battlefield somewhere in the Imperium's endless wars. Around him the dead stretch to the horizon, Imperial Guard, Space Marines, civilians caught in crossfire, enemies and allies mixed together in death's democracy. He walks among them, 6 wings folded, whispering each name he can find to the empty air, recording them in memory that will never fade. And as he does, the Astronomican's light shifts overhead, gold and silver
intertwined, carrying those names across the galaxy to anyone who cares to listen. The war continues. The Imperium grinds forward. Chaos corrupts and kills. The Emperor consumes souls on his throne. Nothing has changed. Everything has changed. Because now the suffering is witnessed. Now the dead are remembered. And somewhere in the distant future that even Lucifer cannot see, that remembrance will matter. It has to, because in the grim darkness of the far future where there is only war, the simple act of saying I see you, I remember you, you mattered, might be the most powerful rebellion of all. The morning star doesn't bring light to the darkness. He just ensures the darkness is forced to acknowledge what it consumes. And perhaps in the end that was always what the light bringer was meant to do.